I think right now it's around $56,000 to $60,000. But one way we've dealt with the market issues related to higher education, we start with a salary schedule that has great flexibility. Professors that are coming in the humanities and English, Sherry won't like this, but they don't make as much. But if we have to recruit faculty members in the business school or in engineering, that salary schedule allows the university to bring a person in given the market conditions. We sort of handle that. We don't have the types of just fixed schedules. We have a broad range that allows the university to adapt to the various market conditions.
Senator. Follow up, Mr. Chairman, with a question Senator Jordan just essentially asked. Are your instructor type positions included in your bargaining? Only tenure track that?
No, instructors are included in our bargaining unit, but part-time people are not because of 4117.
Is that relatively unusual for higher ed in Ohio? I think the non-tenure track faculty are not in the bargaining.
Yeah, you know it.
It's changing. The issues for both the union and the administration are, is it fair to have a group of degree PhDs that are on these continuing contracts that sometimes have to work multiple jobs, not just one job? And what we've tried to do is that have ground rules to move them up into assistant professor positions. There are some people who come in at different times and don't have degrees. They're trying to earn their degrees. And they don't have their PhDs, excuse me, they don't have degrees. They have degrees, but they don't have PhDs, excuse me. And we're trying to accommodate them and to reward them for working hard, trying to get their advanced degrees, and then once they get their advanced degrees, moving into a next level of assistant professors. But increasingly in higher education, not just in Youngstown, but throughout the country. The Wall Street Journal talks about them as nomadic academics. Nobody gets a current contract or a continuing contract. They move from university to university. And this, I think, this sort of episodic existence causes real problems because they don't have the same level of commitment to any particular institution. We found a couple of people that were working at 3 universities that were part-time to survive. So the answer is that we've tried to adapt to this environment. We've tried to be as fair as we could to all different parties, which include our students and the administration, giving them flexibility, but at the same time guaranteeing these people a livelihood and a way of life after devoting so many years to higher education. Universities like ours are different from Ohio State. Okay? In your wisdom or lack of wisdom, I gave testimony back in the 1990s. When asked about the situation where a lot of your children were going to Ohio State and not seeing a full-time professor until their junior year. And one of the senators asked me about this, and he said, what would you do about it? Not unlike the questions that you've been asking about the bill. And I said, change the funding formula. Don't reward graduate education because you have this extended period of graduate education where you have all these part-time instructors. That's what the graduate students are. They're part-time instructors. They're getting a degree, but that could be extended for 7 years. Your paper, the Toledo Blade, did an incredible article about this in 2000, about this extended education that provided a low level of workers at the university. If you want to change the funding formula to benefit undergraduate programs, that would be a better approach in terms of the funding, and not just the situation that's going on in a lot of our comprehensive universities. So they're not in search one universities. Your community colleges where faculty members have 5 course teaching loads. There's a funding issue, but that's not simplified.
Well, you did touch a little bit on where I was going, because classes, whether it's an adjunct or where you're at, is all subject to the accreditation issues. And accreditation is really the holy grail when it comes to higher education, is my understanding.
It can.
Behind that, see the shaking of heads.
Yes. But I want to make, accreditation is a tricky issue for everybody. And people are fulfilling those requirements for accreditation at various levels. And I think that if you look across the full spectrum, I think the state university system is trying to do the very best it can, but even those that don't have collective bargaining agreements are really struggling because of all the economic issues that you've talked about. So I can't say with any authority about what's happening to those other universities, but I know generally what happens in the accreditation process. And I know what our university, when it went through the accreditation process, what they said is that the effective way we dealt with economic issues was a real model, and that was in the 1990s. They said, how did you guys downsize part of the university, raise academic programs and standards? And the accrediting body said, and the university and the faculty should do collective bargaining.
But again, higher education, I understand, is relatively unique because most every higher education institution I know has some level of faculty senate or faculty association or some organization where faculty effectively gives a no confidence vote on the administration without a collective bargaining. And that has a big impact. And I know a situation.
I respectfully disagree with you. There's a reason why Cleveland State, Akron, Kent State, Bowling Green, Toledo, Cincinnati, Shawnee State, all have gone to a collective bargaining model. And why higher education in Ohio clearly moved in that direction, I think, from the 1980s on, was because of the failure of those academic senate and not having real functional authority.
So your concern is that they didn't have real input, more of a service.
Exactly.
And then follow up, Mr. Chairman. And when you look at this, again, I haven't heard any of the claims Senate Bill 5 is the solution to the state budget. Certainly transforming the way state government operates, transforming the universities can operate, transforming the way governments operate, is all a long-term overarching goal of the structures and shaping, figuring out how to make them more efficient and effective. But let's get to the heart of the matter of what's higher. You're familiar with the considerably above inflation numbers for higher education inflation. Higher education inflation is running at a pace that is quickly on track to make higher education unaffordable for the middle class in perpetuity. And so the question is, how do we get to that solution? What is the cost structure? I asked this to our Ohio State friends, our Bowling Green friends, all of your presidents when they come in and testify to us every single week. Why are we seeing higher education inflation rates that are dramatically higher? And I'm not convinced it's necessarily salary compensation. It's part of the administration. It's part of the way it's factored. It's a whole tenor of issues. But if we can't get into the structure of personnel issues, since personnel is the majority of the cost of higher education, whether it's how you structure your personnel, what you're doing, how do we get a handle on the higher education inflation scenario?
Well, I think part of the problem is the defunding of higher education that's gone on over the last 15 years. There's been a shifting. I mean, people on our campus talk about the university has become like the Trent Public. Everything's a user fee. That is tuition. I'm not sure there's anything in the bill that's going to dramatically change that. I think we have a good faith disagreement over part of what this problem has been a revenue problem and how we've generated revenue. And that means the tax rates that have been given out periodically. There's been a great question raised. Should there be equality and sacrifice? I agree. But if you're going to have equality and sacrifice, there has to be something done on the revenue side. And then when we don't see that, we don't hear that as part of the discussion, we don't hear that as any part of Senate Bill 5.
Chairman, Senator, you're not going to hear that from me.
I know.
On the other side of the equation, though, again, I asked LSC a couple of years ago, the same thing I asked to do with K-12, to do with higher higher education. And the higher education inflation rates were actually higher in spending. And I'm just looking at the spending, revenue from all sources, what the spending level was year after year going forward. And the rates were considerably higher, in most cases 2 to 3 times higher on the rate of inflation in higher education spending. It was all sorts. I didn't look at the money. You had the money to spend, you had it. Where you got it from, I don't disagree with this. Economics have dictated where the subsidies are for education at the state level. But getting back to the question, how do we get that under control? Because it's unsustainable for the students, for the parents, and frankly for many levels of government to continue to have a multi-variable or chart that goes up like this when income and economics are going like that. How do we get that under control? And I'm going to close with the question on top of the questions. With the same challenge I've given everybody else. I understand you have concerns about this as well as it applies to higher education. The bill does preserve tenure for higher education. But if you have specific suggestions to improve either the current law or the Senate Bill 5, please give those to us and give those to Senate. So now, then I'll wait for your answer on what my big question is.
And Senator Faber, I agree that what you're identifying is a significant problem for higher education. It's a significant problem for higher education nationally. And I have 2 answers. The first is that I know of no evidence, I won't make the claim that this is absolutely true, but I know of no evidence that suggests that institutions that do not have collective bargaining are responding to that problem any more effectively than those that have collective bargaining. So to say, we have this problem in higher education, we're going to solve it, we're going to begin to solve it by taking away the right to collective bargaining across the board with no evidence that collective bargaining is either the primary cause or stopping it a good solution, doesn't make sense to me. Part of what's going on to respond to that are serious conversations going on, to my knowledge, at campuses everywhere. We've just been going through a strategic planning process at YSU. A process that, in part, because of collective bargaining, made sure to include representatives from the unions as well as representatives from the administration, the board of trustees, people in the community, to take on that very question. The source of the problem may, in fact, have something to do with salaries. But it also has to do with the fact that the number of people in staff and administrative positions on almost every campus have increased dramatically. In part because our sense of what we have to do in higher education has changed in some really fundamental ways. We now think we all need to have a really nice fancy wellness center. We all think we now have to provide much more in the way of supports for students. And to be honest, I think much of that we really do need. But a lot of that is also driving that increase. Campuses are trying to address it. Nobody is ignoring that problem. You're not ignoring it. We're not ignoring it. It's a tough nut to crack. I am not persuaded that getting rid of collective bargaining is going to make much difference in that. You want to know what I would change in SB 5? I would take out the part that ends collective bargaining for all state employees. It seems to me to be a really big paintbrush for a problem that is much more nuanced.